Assalamu alaikum. Today on Nuran Academy, we're going to talk about the scholar who taught the entire world how to see, Ibn al-Haytham. If you find this beneficial, please support us by subscribing and sharing it as a sadaqah. Now, have you ever really thought about how we see? I mean, it seems so simple, right? You just open your eyes. But for most of human history, the answer people had for that simple question was based on a complete, and I mean complete, misunderstanding.
You see, for more than 1,000 years, the smartest people on the planet, we're talking about the ancient Greeks and everyone who came after them, they all believed that our eyes worked like tiny lanterns. They thought we were shooting out invisible beams, like some kind of superpower that would hit objects and let us see them. It kind of makes sense in a way, right? But here's the thing. Nobody ever tested it. Nobody ever proved it. It was just an assumption.
And, that's pretty much how all knowledge worked back then. The truth wasn't about evidence, it was about who said it. If a big name, someone like Aristotle or Ptolemy, declared something was true, well, that was it. It became fact for centuries. And the huge problem with that is, when you're just relying on someone's opinion, even a genius's opinion, progress just stops. It comes to a grinding halt.
So this leads to a massive question, doesn't it? If the whole world is just running on these unchecked ideas, just coasting on what famous people said ages ago, how does anyone find out what's actually true? I mean, how do you even begin to challenge 1,000 years of that's just how it is?
All right, so let's set the stage. This was the world Ibn al-Haytham was born into, a world without proof, a world where authority completely trumped evidence. And that's a dangerous place to be, because that's where knowledge stops being knowledge and starts turning into myth.
So just imagine this intellectual paralysis. Science, as we think of it today, it just didn't exist. What you had instead was a system where you trusted famous names, period. You didn't question them. What you could see with your own two eyes was often seen as less important than something written in an old book. And without any way to actually prove or disprove an idea, well, you're stuck. There's just no way forward.
But then, something changes. A Muslim scholar from Basra comes onto the scene with a completely radical new idea. An idea that was going to change literally everything. His name was Ibn al-Haytham, and his revolutionary principle was simple but powerful. Truth must be found through proof.
And this quote right here, this is the heart of his entire philosophy. Truth is found through experiment, not status. What Ibn al-Haytham was saying is that he didn't care how famous you were. He didn't care about your reputation. The only thing that mattered was, can your claim be tested? And listen, this wasn't him being arrogant or disrespectful to the great thinkers of the past. Not at all. It was an act of deep, deep commitment to the truth itself. So he didn't just come up with a new attitude. He actually created a new method, a step-by-step process. First, you start with a question, right? A hypothesis. Then you design a clear test, an experiment to get your answer. And this next part is absolutely crucial. You have to record what happens without any bias, just the facts. And finally, you make your conclusion based only on the evidence, nothing else. Sound familiar? Yep. Today we call this the scientific method.
Okay, so Ibn al-Haytham didn't just talk the talk. He walked the walk. He took his method and applied it to that ancient puzzle of human vision. And what he did next with a simple darkened room would illuminate the entire world. His experiment was so simple but absolutely brilliant. He took a room and made it completely dark, what was known back then as a camera obscura, which literally means dark room. Then, in one of the walls, he made a tiny little pinhole, just enough to let a single control beam of light shine through from the outside. And what he saw next was the proof, the definitive proof. On the wall, right across from that little hole, an image of the outside world appeared. Perfectly clear, but upside down. And that was the key. For an upside-down image to show up like that, the light had to be coming from the objects outside, traveling in straight lines through the pinhole and hitting the back wall. In that one moment, he proved it. Vision wasn't something shooting out of our eyes. It was light coming into them. And from that one single elegant experiment, wow, the consequences were massive. The whole field of modern optics, it was born right there in that dark room. Think about it. The camera you use, it's literally just a camera obscura, a dark room built on his experiment. Every lens, every pair of eyeglasses, photography, even the giant telescopes we use to look at the stars, all of it traces back to this one foundational discovery. But wait a minute. This brings up a really deep question. What gave this man the courage, not just intellectually, but spiritually, to stand up and challenge 1,000 years of accepted wisdom? Well, the answer isn't found in spite of his faith, it's found because of it.
I mean, he tells us himself in his own words. A real seeker of truth isn't someone who just reads old books and nods along. No, a real seeker is someone who questions them, who investigates. For him, this wasn't just a good idea, it was a duty. And that spirit, that drive to investigate, was planted deep in the soil of his Islamic worldview.
And here's why. In Islam, one of the most beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Haq, the absolute truth. Just think about that for a second. If God is the truth, then an honest, sincere investigation of the world he created can never lead you away from him. It's impossible. In fact, it can only bring you closer. It means you should never, ever be afraid of where the evidence leads.
So when you look at it from this perspective, the scientific method isn't arrogant at all. It's actually an act of incredible humility. It's about saying, my opinion doesn't matter, and even the opinions of the most famous scholars don't matter as much as the truth. It's about silencing your ego and just letting the evidence, the reality of Allah's creation, speak for itself. And this is so critical for us to understand today. We really have to reclaim this intellectual legacy. We need to internalize the fact that in Islam, faith and reason are not enemies. They're not fighting each other. They're like two wings on a bird. You need both of them to truly soar.
You see, Islam always guides us away from dangerous extremes. On the one hand, you have thinking without any faith. That path often leads to arrogance, right? Where people study creation but completely forget the creator. But on the other hand, you have faith without any thinking, and that leads to blind imitation, where the community just stagnates and stops growing. The true Islamic path is that beautiful, balanced one, right in the middle. Let's be absolutely clear about this. The man who laid the groundwork for the entire modern scientific method wasn't some secular thinker who thought religion was backwards. He was a devout Muslim, a man who prayed, who fasted, who believed with all his heart. His faith wasn't a barrier to his science. It was the engine that drove it.
So what's the takeaway here? This whole story isn't just a cool piece of history. It is a timeless call to action. It's just as relevant for us sitting here today as it was for people back in the 11th century.
When you boil it all down, the legacy of Ibn al-Haytham is one of incredible intellectual courage and deep spiritual integrity. He gave us a blueprint for how to seek knowledge. He's telling us, don't just go along with what's popular, test what's true. Don't just follow the crowd, follow the evidence, follow the truth.
And so that leaves us with one final big question. This man, Ibn al-Haytham, literally gave the world a new way to find truth. He taught humanity how to think critically, how to rely on evidence. So the question for you and for me is, what are we going to do with that powerful legacy? What will you question? What will you test? And what will you build now?
Presented and created by Neuron Studio.